let me go to Mama Vioso Abuaje, who is currently speaking to a gentleman who's worked with both banks, Capital and UT banks. He's in fact written a book detailing his experiences in the two banks. And guess who wrote the foreword of the book? Prince Kofi Amoabeng. And Mama Vioso Abuaje is ready. Good morning to you, Mama V. And that discussion, how is it going to pan out?
Good morning. Well, you're right with all the things that you said. Today is actually 14th August. It marks exactly 1 year since the Bank of Ghana took the license from UT and Capital Bank. You know where we are today. But Samuel Oshry has written a book. And his book, as you rightly indicated, forwarded by a man who set up UT Bank, a man that we all admired greatly. And we're here to talk to him. We're actually coming to you live from the National Banking College because as part of the first anniversary, the book will be launched and then there will be a public lecture as well. I'll leave the details for someone to share with us. The book is titled Fates of System Thinking. So Samuel, first of all, thank you very much for sitting down with us. Can I ask what inspired this book, first of all?
All right, thank you. The inspiration came from the day UT went down. I was leading a team to get an ISO certification for another company. And that morning, as I went through with some of the best people I knew, the news came through, and it was the most depressing thing I had perhaps ever gone through because my whole CV was down the line. The two companies I had worked with, family I had gotten to love, a passion I had devoted my life to was gone. And the memories of it had to be preserved, not for us, but for posterity. And so the book was basically inspired by a passion to learn and a passion that this won't happen again, because it's happened too many times in our history. And the question of why it keeps coming up should perhaps be dialogued and solved once and for all.
But you got Prince Kofi Amoabeng to forward this for you, even after the collapse of not only his bank and Capital, but also the recent one, the 5 banks.
That was a humbling experience, and I'm grateful to him for having done that. I remember when the book was done, I called him and I told him I had a book, which was going to be published, and I would be grateful if he could look at it before it went public. So I gave him the book, which he read. He actually read every single word, and I then requested that if he will be willing to forward. A question I knew was tough because it would seem as a critic, which it wasn't. It was a learning curve. And having looked at the book and having looked at the content, he actually believed that beyond ourselves is the generations after us. And so he would be willing to put his name on the book. And that is still something that is humbling.
Sure. So let me just share a bit of some of the things that Prince Kofi Amoabeng said. And this is picked from, obviously, the chapters that he wrote. Not a chapter, but the foreword. He says the rapid growth and expansion into a bank and the influx of top bankers with diverse cultures, different from that of UT, was a major cause of the problems that resulted in high NPLs and liquidity crisis. And I think there's a point where he also mentions liquidity was not the only issue with the bank. You were there, you've written this book, you have the inside filler. What happened?
That's a difficult question to answer because it has so many parts and there are so many moving pieces. But I'll try and give a view into. Now, UT Bank started with a singular objective, which is to give loans to people who ordinarily are profiled high risk to the traditional bank. And so to start with, the idea to bank the unbanked was taking one of the boldest decisions ever. Having done that and succeeded for 10 years, the bank had some of the best commitments you could ever find, amazing culture. but culture dilutes over time. One of the things I argue in the book is that, yes, the objective to fund that informal sector may have been a noble objective, but the business model at its heart at the point was not sustainable. And that's the first point I make in the book. Because in banking, you take money from people who have and give it to people who do not have. So the focus at any point in time is you can give what you don't have. And so if I seek to give people irrespective of the fact that I do not have, then there is a problem. And so UT bent in giving loans to people who could not afford and people who ordinarily won't get it anywhere, broke its back in feeding or in funding the informal sector. Now he says that in the foreword that the vision of UT Bank, and ordinarily so, because even in that sector, risk analysts will tell you the standard deviation is widely distributed because you're given to individuals who are spread out. But over time, loans were given to single entities which were not primarily the focus of the bank anymore. And so those were issues, and that is only one. That is to speak to technical business model. So that is one. So you can look at the details of the model, the fact that the cash flows, what were the lines that generate cash, were those lines secured? Was the fact that loans given to people, were the operations in guaranteeing those loans done as best practice will recommend. Those were things that over time, as institutions grow, it becomes difficult to monitor, which was a problem. So that is one of the issues. The second issue you can talk about, which I emphasize in the book, is we've spoken a lot about corporate governance. But I guess there is a bigger message in that message of corporate governance, which is a lack of independence. People think and believe things for two reasons. One, the information we're all privy to, and our social cohesion. And so people I know tend to influence what I do, and which is called suggested thinking. So people will suggest to me, and I do things not necessarily because I believe them or think they are right. The second one is what kind of information I have. And so if I've been privy to a detail you don't have, I may take a certain action you don't have. But information is so targeted and sometimes biased such that people cannot make the accurate decisions because I am only seeing a half-sided story. It's a one-sided story. And so in the process of trying to, so people were only fed from one side of the story, not having looked at the totality of issues in making decisions, which is human, you know, but these biases can be reduced. The psychologists call it the heuristic. So you can actually understand what your biases are and you can mitigate them. Okay. These are 2 out of 7 issues.
Okay, but in fact, you started your work formally, your banking work at UT Bank. But you moved on also later on to Capital Bank. That was where you were, and then you left. In fact, you left from there. So what happened at Capital Bank at the time that you were there? Have you figured out in this book, for instance, what went wrong?
So in the book, I tell my opinion of both sides of the stories. So I was with UT for a much longer time, but quite a stint with Capital Bank. Capital Bank, in my humble opinion, and in one of the sub-chapters, in chapter 3, I actually deal with that. I think the base issues with Capital Bank were the fact that people had seen a bit of change management, and so people had gotten tired in order to put their hands to the wheel.
What does that mean?
I'll tell you what. There was a staff satisfaction survey, which was the last work I did before I left there. When you look at the data of how much not committed and how much tired people were, it was perhaps obvious people were not willing to break their backs to build it. Of course, we're hearing a lot more in the news and the BOJ report, which speaks to a lot more issues that perhaps may have given people cause to behave the way they did. But overall, I think the essence of careful selection is important in building a business. And so if I have a vision and I'm going to put people on, the question is, are those people competent enough? So Capital Bank, I would sum it up in people.
So essentially, they didn't have committed people who believed in the cause. Is that it?
Beyond that, so yes, there were clearly people who did not believe in the cause, according to that data, and that is not mine work. That is a survey that was done. So almost 4 out of 5 people, which is about 80% of all the employees who filled that satisfaction survey, were dissatisfied. Beyond that level of huge dissatisfaction, I guess the culture was beginning to form, but in my humble opinion, the culture hadn't built concretely in order to understand that this business is about a bit more sacrifice, this business is about a bit more commitment to steady. Capital Bank had a relatively shorter lifespan. Sure. From 2009, when it was set up in October. It had grown quite rapidly. Now, not having time to understand the dynamics of the business and growing exponentially poses risk. It doesn't mean that it can't be solved. Okay. But when you disregard the concept of what best practice is in managing that exponential growth, you will have problems.
Okay. All right. We have to end our conversation on the AM Talk on the AM show, but quickly tell us, so this is going to be launched at 9. Who is going to be here?
So we invited the Banking Supervision Department, and as of yesterday, we got a word they would be represented. We invited some MDs in the industry. We're hoping they would be represented. All the banks have been invited, and of course the general public is in, because I guess the discussion here is the public lecture, which would go a bit more into detail as to not only what has happened, but what the way forward should be in our humble opinion.
Okay. You were fortunate enough, you exited Capital Bank just before the collapse. So you have a job, actually.
Yes, I do have a job, but I left Capital Bank in 2016. So that's, let's say, a year before the whole incident happened. But it is not to say I'm distant from the pain and distant from what went on.
Because obviously, you have colleagues, former colleagues, who are out of job now.
Exactly. And if even it were about me, it's my CV. Now, I can only point, it's just like going to a prestigious boys' school and you wake up and it's a girls' school. So it's painful, not to say the least, but I guess the friends and colleagues who have lost their jobs and are still looking share far more pain. And so there's something in the dedication, perhaps, which would sum up the discussion, and okay, so
are you going to be reading? But just before we go, I wanted to ask, do you still use Capital and UT in your CV? Have you taken those experiences out of your CV?
They make me, actually. I think that the fact that I work there makes me who I am. At least I know what not to do, which is a big question. We go through life sometimes figuring what to do, but sometimes you would know what not to do rather than what to do. So those two experiences have practically formed who I will become. And so this is the part I was looking for.
Okay.
To all my,
let's do it real quick.
To all my work colleagues at the erstwhile UT Bank and Capital Bank, thank you for all the lessons you taught me. It is our collective experience I share, with the hope that the world may learn and hopefully become a better place.
Thank you very much, Samuel Otchere, for sharing a bit about this book with us here on the AM show. So back to you, Roland Walker, with the conversation. But obviously, yes, we're marking an anniversary today, not one that excites everybody. I guess it doesn't even excite anyone, but it's a very important day, whichever way.
Yes, and we wish him all the best. I'll see whether I'll pass through his events this morning as he launches the book, but that was a great conversation there.